Picture this. You're driving to work in the morning.
Just a normal Tuesday.
Right. A totally normal day. You're minding your own business, maybe going over your schedule for the day in your head, and you're just cruising. When suddenly,
Out of nowhere.
literally out of nowhere, someone cuts right in front of you at a roundabout.
Oh, man.
And instantly, your heart jumps into your throat.
Yep.
Your foot slams the brake pedal, and you just experience this sudden, intense spike of cortisol.
The pure adrenaline rush.
Exactly. Fortunately, nobody gets hurt, right? The moment passes and you continue on your way. But for the rest of that drive, your hands are gripping the steering wheel just a little bit tighter.
You're suddenly very awake.
Oh, completely. And it's this jarring, visceral reminder of how much skill, spatial awareness, and absolute concentration driving a 2-ton machine actually requires.
It is the ultimate invisible tightrope. We spend so much of our adult lives completely on autopilot that we forget the sheer neurological and mechanical complexity of what we're actually doing.
We really do.
Like, when we merge onto a highway or navigate a busy intersection, it is arguably the most dangerous, complex task the average person performs on a daily basis.
But we treat it like walking to the mailbox.
Exactly. We just don't think about it.
Well, welcome to today's deep dive, because we are going to strip away that illusion of simplicity today.
We really are.
We have some incredibly fascinating source material. We're looking at a comprehensive transcript from an English learning video, specifically from the Leo English podcast.
Which is a great resource, by the way.
It is. And it details 100 essential phrases and maps out the complete step-by-step journey of navigating driving school in an English-speaking country.
From absolute zero to fully licensed.
Right. But our mission today isn't just to recite a list of driving vocabulary. We want to unpack the anatomy of acquiring a high-stakes, life-or-death skill from scratch.
Because learning the mechanics of driving is really only half the battle.
What's the other half?
The language of survival. You're learning cooperation in a highly unpredictable shared public space. You are essentially learning how to communicate with thousands of strangers at 60 miles an hour.
That is a terrifying way to frame it.
But it's true.
It is. So whether you are an experienced driver who navigates your morning commute completely zoned out, or maybe someone preparing to get a license in a new country, or honestly, if you're just a lifelong learner fascinated by how we acquire and test intensely practical skills, this deep dive is for you.
There's a lot to unpack here.
There really is.
Great.
We're going to reveal the highly rigid, deeply psychological structure behind the everyday act of driving. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Let's start at the very beginning. The gateway to the road.
The paperwork.
Exactly. Long before you even touch a steering wheel, you have to navigate the bureaucracy.
Which is its own kind of test.
It really is. The source outlines the first steps. Finding a driving school, comparing packages, do you need a 10-lesson bundle or a 20-hour bundle? And then officially enrolling.
Right. Proving who you are.
Yeah, providing ID, proving your address, paying a fee to apply for that provisional license. Oh, and you have to meet the minimum age, which is usually 16 or 17.
What's fascinating here is, well, it's the psychological shift that occurs during the seemingly mundane enrollment process.
How do you mean?
We often dismiss bureaucracy as just paperwork, right? An annoyance. But these steps serve as a profound psychological gateway.
Like a rite of passage.
Exactly. It's a state-sanctioned rite of passage. When you receive that provisional license, or learner's permit, you are entering a liminal space.
A liminal space. I like that.
You are legally allowed on the road, which is a massive shift in your societal status, but you are severely restricted.
Right, the provisional part. The source defines it strictly. It gives you legal permission to drive, but only under specific conditions, like having a qualified instructor sitting right next to you.
Yes, the state is deliberately creating a highly structured environment of supervised risk.
Okay, I actually want to push back on that phrase, supervised risk, for a second.
Go for it.
Is it really a risk if the instructor has dual controls? I mean, they have their own brake and clutch pedals over on the passenger side. It feels more like an illusion of risk for the student while the instructor's actually, flying the plane.
That is a critical distinction, but I'd argue the risk is very real, especially cognitively.
Because the student still feels the pressure.
Yes, and physically. Sure, the instructor has a brake pedal, but they don't have a steering wheel.
Oh, that's true.
If the student panics and jerks the wheel toward oncoming traffic, the instructor only has fractions of a second to physically reach over and grab the wheel to correct it.
Which happens.
It absolutely happens. The dual controls mitigate catastrophic mechanical failure, but the student is still the primary operator of a kinetic weapon.
A kinetic weapon. Wow.
That's why the provisional license matters so much. It's the government basically saying, we recognize you are a hazard, but you are a necessary hazard if society is going to function.
That is so true. And that leads right into the very first physical requirement before you can even get out there, the eyesight test.
Crucial.
You have to prove you can visually process the environment safely. And the rule from the source is absolute. If you need glasses or contact lenses to pass that baseline test, you simply must wear them when you drive.
It establishes the absolute baseline of responsibility.
It's like the system accounting for physical limitations before you even touch a car.
Right. The system is fundamentally transactional at this stage.
Yeah.
It says, we will grant you the privilege of operating heavy machinery, but you must actively mitigate your personal physical deficits first. It's entirely non-negotiable.
So you've done the paperwork, you've mitigated the physical deficits, you have the provisional license in hand. Now we transition from the theory of enrollment to the overwhelming physical reality of sitting in the driver's seat for the first lesson.
A moment of truth.
Yeah. And the source maps this out as a period of intense cognitive overload.
Oh, absolutely.
Because before the car moves an inch, the instructor has to introduce this entire alien ecosystem.
You're essentially sitting in a cockpit.
Right. You're suddenly managing the steering wheel, the accelerator which controls your speed, the brake, the clutch for manual cars, the gear stick, 3 different mirrors, and the indicators.
It's a lot. The human brain is not naturally wired to separate the functions of all 4 limbs simultaneously while processing high-speed visual data.
You have to build entirely new neural pathways.
Literally from scratch.
And because of that massive cognitive overload, there is this incredibly revealing, kind of funny anecdote from the source material.
Oh, the first lesson story.
Yes. A student recalls their very first lesson. They're sitting in the driver's seat, absolutely petrified, gripping the wheel with white knuckles.
We've all been there.
And the instructor turns to them, completely calm, and says, just relax and listen to my voice.
Which is the worst thing you can tell a panicking person.
Exactly. And the learner is sitting there thinking, easy for you to say. You aren't the one who might drive us into a brick wall.
Right.
And naturally, what happens next? They stall the manual car 4 times in the first 10 minutes.
Which is practically a biological guarantee.
Let's actually dig into the mechanics of stalling, because the source defines it, and we tend to just think of it as the car turns off.
Right. But it's much more violent than that.
It really is. Mechanically, stalling happens because you accidentally turn off the engine by releasing the clutch too quickly or too slowly.
You are trying to connect a spinning engine to stationary wheels using the clutch plates.
And if you release the clutch too quickly,
You force that connection abruptly. The stationary wheels win the physics battle, the engine can't maintain its rotation, and it violently shudders and dies.
and that mechanical friction is just the perfect metaphor for the educational friction happening in the driver's brain.
That's a great way to put it. Stalling the car isn't just a failure to operate a pedal. It is a profound moment of psychological vulnerability.
Because everybody sees it.
Exactly. When an adult learner stalls a car in live traffic, the engine dies, the cabin goes dead silent, and suddenly there is a line of cars honking behind you.
The fight or flight response is overwhelming.
It's pure panic. But this is where the pedagogy of driving school is actually quite brilliant. Instructors completely expect it.
They know it's coming.
Early, safe failure is engineered into the process. You literally cannot learn where the biting point of a clutch is without crossing the line and failing. It's a feature of the learning process, not a bug.
But why is that specific failure so devastating? I mean, if I'm learning to play the guitar and I miss a chord, I don't break out in a cold sweat. What is it about stalling that triggers such intense shame?
Because missing a chord on a guitar doesn't inconvenience a dozen strangers in 2-ton vehicles who are trying to get to work.
That's fair.
Driving is a deeply public performance. When you stall, you are visibly broadcasting your incompetence to the tribe, so to speak.
Right.
And for an adult whose ego is tied to being capable and independent, that public failure is agonizing.
That makes the advice from the source on how to handle it so crucial. It emphasizes honest communication.
Yes.
Instead of panicking or melting down, it trains the learner to just say, I'm sorry I stalled the car, let me try again.
It actively forces the learner to embrace the mistake.
Right. It strips the shame out of the learning process.
Let me try again. Might be the most powerful phrase in adult education. It acknowledges the failure without internalizing it as a character flaw. You are simply recalibrating a physical input.
And once that physical calibration starts to click and you can actually keep the engine alive, the learner is thrust out of the quiet side streets and into the complex, moving ecosystem of real traffic.
The real world.
The progression of skill outlined in the text is highly calculated. You start by just moving in a straight line.
Which sounds easy until you realize how easily a car drifts.
Exactly. Then you graduate to turning, navigating simple roads, and eventually you hit junctions where roads meet.
And junctions introduce a critical piece of the driving lexicon.
Giving way.
Yes, because you are no longer just managing the physics of your own machine. You have to predict and yield to the physics of other operators.
And there's a fascinating linguistic deep dive in the materials here. It highlights that British English uses the phrase give way to describe letting other vehicles pass before you move.
Right.
Whereas American English uses the term yield.
They mean the exact same legal thing, but the tone is so different.
It really is. Give way implies almost a polite social contract.
Like after you.
Right. You are literally offering your space to someone else. Yield feels much more imperative, mathematical, and structural.
It implies submitting to a superior force or right-of-way.
But fundamentally, both concepts are designed to manage the kinetic flow of traffic at critical intersection points without requiring a full stop unless absolutely necessary.
Keep the flow moving.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And speaking of keeping the flow moving, once you survive the junctions, you inevitably hit the most chaotic environment of all.
The roundabout.
The roundabout. Circular junctions flowing in one direction. They require rapid-fire judgment of speed, distance, and the intentions of other drivers.
It's advanced calculus on the fly.
It really is. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Because as stressful as a roundabout is, the true peak of learner anxiety isn't moving fast. It's moving incredibly slow.
We have to talk about parking.
We have to talk about parking, the great equalizer.
Doesn't matter how well you handle a highway, parking will always reveal the gaps in your spatial awareness.
The source breaks down three main types of parking. You have bay parking, which is pulling into a market space.
Pretty standard.
Right. Then reverse parking. And finally, the undisputed heavyweight champion of driving anxiety, parallel parking.
Parking between two cars along the side of the road.
And we really have to ask why parallel parking induces such universal dread.
Well, think about the cognitive dissonance it creates.
Okay, break that down.
Moving forward in a straight line aligns with human biology. Our eyes are on the front of our heads. We evolved to move and process information forward.
Right. Walking, running.
Exactly. Parallel parking demands that you move a heavy machine backward, at an angle, into a confined space that you cannot fully see.
Wedged between two expensive obstacles.
Yes, you are required to turn the steering wheel in the opposite direction of your intended final orientation, looking over your shoulder, while managing the delicate friction of the clutch and brake.
It's completely unnatural.
It demands a level of proprioception, a deeply internalized awareness of where the machine ends and the world begins, that a beginner simply does not possess.
But the curriculum doesn't just leave you to figure out that spatial awareness by trial and error. It introduces a brilliant, highly practical workaround.
Reference points.
Reference points. I love this concept. You are taught to use fixed markers on the car itself to judge distance.
Like the edge of the bonnet or a specific sticker on the rear window.
Right. You use those fixed points to judge distance relative to the curb or the other cars. You align the little mark in your window with the taillight of the car next to you, and when they match, you turn the wheel exactly one rotation.
That is a masterclass in cognitive offloading.
Cognitive offloading. Explain that.
You are taking an incredibly abstract, overwhelming spatial problem and making it concrete. A novice driver cannot accurately guess the distance between their rear bumper and the car behind them.
The brain just doesn't have the data.
Exactly. So you outsource the spatial judgment to a fixed visual rule. You stop trying to feel the car and you start following a geometric algorithm.
Outsourcing spatial judgment. Let's sit with that idea for a second, because that is essentially what we do with checklists in aviation or project management frameworks in business.
It scales to everything.
It really does. I want you listening right now to think about how you use your own mental reference points when you are tackling an intimidating new task at work or in life.
That's a great question.
When a project feels too massive or abstract, what are the fixed markers you use to guide yourself through it? When the big picture is too much to process, you just line up the sticker on the window with the curb, make your turn, and trust the geometry.
It is the essence of breaking a complex, high-stakes problem down into a series of highly manageable, low-stakes steps.
So you're mastering the clutch, you're surviving the chaos of the roundabout, You're using your reference points to successfully parallel park.
You're driving.
You're driving. But driving school isn't just about the physical manipulation of the car. The journey outlined in the source pivots heavily to the unspoken curriculum.
Classroom.
The classroom. You have to pass the theory test.
The intellectual foundation that gives the physical skill its context.
Exactly. You study books, videos, practice tests. You are tested with multiple choice questions on road rules, the meaning of regulatory signs like red triangles, and things like safe signaling distances and speed limits.
It requires real, dedicated study.
But the most revealing part of the theory curriculum isn't the multiple choice questions. It is the hazard perception test.
This is a fascinating cognitive exercise.
The source defines it as the ability to watch driving footage from the driver's perspective and physically click a mouse the exact moment you spot a developing hazard.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the hazard perception test is measuring a pure, high-level cognitive skill. It is actively testing your predictive awareness.
Predictive awareness.
Spotting a child chasing a ball on the sidewalk, or noticing a car's reverse lights illuminate in a driveway up ahead, or seeing a cyclist glance over their left shoulder.
To a novice, these are just random pieces of environmental background noise.
Right. But to an experienced driver, these are massive neurological red flags.
But hold on, doesn't everyone eventually see the child run into the street? Why does clicking a mouse a fraction of a second earlier matter on a computer test?
Because that fraction of a second is the difference between a reactive response and a proactive intervention. A reactive driver waits for the child to enter the road, their amygdala floods their system with panic, and they slam the brakes, hoping physics is on their side.
Hoping they stop in time.
Right. The hazard perception test forces the learner to engage their prefrontal cortex. It demands that you project the current environmental data 3 seconds into the future.
So when you see the cyclist glance over their shoulder,
You proactively ease off the accelerator before they even begin to drift into your lane. You are managing the hazard before it actually exists.
that is incredible. And the source states this plainly. Better hazard perception literally saves lives.
By shifting the driver from reactive to proactive.
You have to prove you can shift from being a passenger who happens to be holding the steering wheel to an active director of the vehicle's future path.
And that transition from reactive reflex to proactive prediction is the defining characteristic of true competence in any high-stakes environment. On the road, it is the fundamental barrier between life and death.
It's incredibly intense when you frame it that way.
The stakes couldn't be higher.
And once you have proven that predictive awareness and conquered the theory, you are finally eligible for the ultimate trial.
The final boss.
The final boss of the entire journey, the practical exam.
The 40 minutes that define your freedom.
And this introduces a highly disruptive new character into our narrative, the examiner.
A completely different species from the instructor.
Exactly. Up until this moment, you've been sitting next to your instructor, a familiar, supportive teacher whose entire job is to catch your mistakes and guide you.
They want you to succeed.
Right. The examiner is an official tester from the licensing authority. They are strictly neutral, they don't know your learning history, and their only job is to assess you objectively.
The introduction of the examiner changes the atmospheric pressure inside the cabin completely.
It's instantly cold.
It violently shifts the dynamic from a collaborative, safe learning environment to a strict, unforgiving, evaluative one.
People are notoriously more nervous during the practical test than they were during 40 hours of lessons.
Oh, without a doubt.
The examiner just sits there with a clipboard or an iPad, silently observing your mirror checks, your speed control, your positioning, and your signaling. They are looking for safe, controlled, confident driving.
And they use a rigidly defined fault system to measure that?
Let's actually look at that grading structure, particularly the one used in places like the UK, because the text breaks it down, and it is fascinating.
It's very structured.
It's divided into 3 categories. First, you have minor faults. These are small mistakes. Maybe you hesitated a bit too long at a roundabout, or your parallel park took an extra adjustment.
Not perfect, but not dangerous.
Right. And here's the kicker. You can accumulate up to 15 minor faults and still pass the test. But if you hit 16, you fail.
That number 15 is incredibly revealing about the philosophy of the test.
See, I have to push back on that number. 15 mistakes in a 40-minute drive. That sounds like a terrible driver.
It does sound high.
Right. If an airline pilot made 15 minor errors during a short flight, they'd be grounded. Why is the tolerance so high for drivers?
Because the system is deeply pragmatic about human fallibility in an uncontrolled environment.
Uncontrolled meaning the public road.
Exactly. The road is not a controlled airspace. It is chaotic. The examiner isn't demanding robotic perfection. They are evaluating systemic safety.
Okay, give me an example.
If you forget to check your center mirror once before braking gently, that is a minor fault. It's friction. But it didn't cause a crash.
It wasn't life-threatening.
Right. The system recognizes that a driver can be slightly imperfect, maybe a bit nervous, maybe slightly unpolished, and still be fundamentally safe. It separates harmless friction from actual danger.
Which perfectly explains the next two categories. The second category is serious faults.
These are the big ones.
These are dangerous or potentially dangerous actions. Failing to yield at a junction or pulling out in front of a cyclist. If you get just one serious fault, it is an instant failure.
No second chances.
And finally, there are dangerous faults. This means the examiner had to physically intervene to prevent an accident. They had to grab the wheel or hit their dual brake pedal. Again, instant failure.
The tolerance for minor friction is high, but the tolerance for physical danger is absolute zero.
Zero.
The moment your imperfection threatens the physical safety of the environment, the test is functionally over.
The source provides some great anecdotal evidence for how brutal this system can be.
The failure stories are always the best.
They really are. One of the speakers talks about their younger brother who failed the test 3 times.
Ouch.
The first time, he failed for a single serious fault. He misjudged a gap at a junction. The second time, the psychological pressure just crushed him, and he accumulated 16 minor errors.
Death by 1,000 cuts.
Exactly. But the third time, he finally passed with only 2 minor faults.
He figured it out.
And then there's another story about a friend who failed 5 times. But the core takeaway from the text is that this friend is now an exceptionally careful, excellent driver.
Precisely because all those failures forced her into dozens of extra hours of practice.
Right.
It completely reframes the societal stigma of failing a driving test. We tend to view failure as a permanent character flaw.
Or a sign that you're just bad at driving.
Right. But the licensing system uses failure as a forced extension of the training period. It is designed so that persistence eventually builds a safer operator.
By the time that person passed on their 6th attempt, they had likely logged 3 times as many hours behind the wheel as someone who barely scraped a pass on their first try.
They're a much more experienced driver on day 1 of having their license.
And the mechanism that bridges the gap between a failure and a future success is the debrief.
The post-test review.
Yes. Whether you pass or fail, at the end of the test, the examiner gives you a specific review of exactly what you did well and where you accumulated faults.
The debrief is the most critical learning loop in the entire process. Without it, you only know the outcome, not the root cause.
You just know you failed.
Right. If you fail, the debrief provides the exact roadmap for your next phase of targeted practice. It removes the mystery from the failure.
So to avoid that failure, you have to master what we can call the lingua franca of the road.
The shared language.
It's not just about turning the wheel, it's about fluent communication. And the foundation of that fluency is an acronym drilled into every learner.
MSM.
MSM, mirror, signal, maneuver.
The holy trinity of directional change.
It is a non-negotiable, chronologically sequenced habit for any directional change. You check your mirrors first to gather environmental data.
See what's around you.
You signal your intention to inform the other operators, and only then do you perform the maneuver.
The order is everything.
Right. Because if you change that order, if you signal before checking your mirror, you might signal a lane change directly into a speeding truck. The sequence is the safety.
And communicating inside the car is just as important as signaling outside of it.
Oh, the instructor-student dynamic.
Yes, the source heavily emphasizes specific vocabulary and emotional maturity when dealing with the instructor's feedback.
You have to ask for clarification constantly, like, did you say turn left or go straight?
You never just guess.
And when the instructor corrects a mistake, you have to gracefully accept that feedback instead of getting defensive.
Which is incredibly difficult.
It is. When you are sweating, gripping the wheel, managing a clutch, and someone tells you you're doing it wrong, the natural human instinct is to snap back.
It requires immense emotional regulation. The curriculum is subtly teaching learners how to suppress their defensive reflex in order to maintain a productive, analytical learning environment inside the cabin.
Beyond speaking to the instructor, the driver has to fluently read the physical language of the road itself, the signs and lines.
The infrastructure speaking to you.
The curriculum categorizes signs strictly. Warning signs, which are usually triangular, alert you to potential hazards.
Like sharp bends or pedestrian crossings.
Right. Then regulatory signs, which are often circular, dictate what you absolutely must or must not do.
Speed limit stop signs.
Exactly. And informational signs guide your distances and navigation. But the most interesting part of this physical language is the lines painted on the asphalt.
Ah, the lines.
The text contrasts a solid double white line down the center of the road with a dashed white line. A dashed line means you can cross it to overtake a slower vehicle if it's safe.
Simple enough.
But a solid double white line strictly prohibits crossing or overtaking.
And this raises an important question about how we, as a society, interact with rules.
God.
It's very easy to view a double solid line as a bureaucratic annoyance when you are stuck behind a tractor going 15 miles an hour.
Oh, we've all been there. It's so frustrating.
But the text makes a profound assertion. Every rule exists for a good reason.
But doesn't that sound a bit naive? Surely some speed limits or road lines are just outdated or overly cautious.
It's not about blind obedience. It's about understanding the underlying mathematics of the road.
The mathematics.
That double solid white line isn't there to frustrate your morning commute. It is painted there because traffic engineers have calculated the sight lines on that specific curve.
Ah.
They factor in the closing speed of two vehicles traveling in opposite directions. The math dictates that there is physically not enough visible asphalt for you to execute a pass and return to your lane before a head-on collision becomes inevitable.
Wow.
When you grasp the physics and safety behind the rule, it stops being an arbitrary mandate and becomes a logical tool for your own survival.
Every rule exists for a good reason. It fundamentally changes your perspective when you look at the infrastructure around you.
It makes it a collaborative system instead of an oppressive one.
So you've internalized the math of the double white line, you've mastered the MSM sequence, you've passed the theory, and you've survived the examiner's clipboard.
You did it.
You pull back into the test center, turn off the engine, and the examiner says, "Congratulations, you passed."
The best feeling in the world.
You have your full driver's license. But the text makes one final crucial point. The transition to a fully qualified driver does not mean the learning stops.
Earning the license is really just the beginning of your independent education.
The journey continues into what is called the probationary period.
Right.
In many countries, newly licensed drivers face stricter rules for the first year or two. They might have a zero-tolerance alcohol limit or speed restrictions.
This is society's buffer zone. It is a slow, methodical integration of a new operator into a complex system.
Because you're still a beginner, really.
Exactly. You have the mechanical skill, but you do not yet have the accumulated wisdom of experience. The probationary period artificially limits your exposure to high-risk variables while you build that necessary intuition.
And building that intuition is what bridges the gap between being a legal driver and being a genuinely competent driver.
Competence is an ongoing journey of building experience, not a destination reached on test day.
The source even recommends advanced driving courses to handle challenging conditions. Night driving, motorways, heavy rain.
Because every unfamiliar city you navigate, every sudden downpour, forces you to adapt.
It is a lifelong process of calibration. And to perfectly encapsulate the physical reality of that constant practical challenge, I have to share the funniest anecdote from the source material to wrap this up.
Let's hear it.
One of the speakers is asked what the absolute hardest thing for them to learn was, and without hesitation, they say, the hill start.
Oh, the dreaded hill start.
For those who haven't driven a manual, a hill start involves being stopped on an incline and needing to move forward without rolling backward into the car behind you.
It requires a flawless balance.
It is terrifying. It requires balancing the clutch and accelerator while releasing the handbrake. And this speaker confesses that during a lesson, they completely botched the balance, panicked, and just slowly rolled backward.
In slow motion.
In slow motion.
Yeah.
Gently bumping into the car behind them. They joke that their poor instructor aged 10 years in that single agonizingly slow second.
It perfectly captures the high-stress, occasionally comedic reality of translating theory into action while fighting gravity.
It really does. So what does this all mean? We've traced this entire life cycle from the bureaucratic paperwork to the nuance of the hill start.
It's quite a journey.
Navigating driving school is ultimately a masterclass in how humans learn, practice, communicate, and improve step by step.
It requires intense patience.
And the persistence to keep turning the key after you stall the engine in front of angry commuters. It requires the humility to accept critical feedback from an instructor or an examiner. Suppress your ego and use that feedback to grow.
It demands a willingness to be visibly imperfect in the pursuit of mastery.
Exactly. So, for you listening, I want you to reflect on your own journey. If you are a driver, think back to those terrifying first lessons. Think about the cognitive overload of the clutch, and look at how far your brain has come to make that process automatic.
It's amazing what the brain can adapt to.
And if you don't drive, think about your current process of learning any new, intimidating skill. What are your personal stalls? What are the mental reference points you use to make sense of the overwhelming challenges in front of you?
That's a powerful way to apply this. And I want to leave you with one final broader thought to mull over or explore on your own, building on everything we've discussed today.
What's that?
Think about what the daily act of driving truly represents. We've spent this time dissecting the intense training, the strict rules, and the language of signs and lines. But when you finally hit the open road and merge onto a highway, you are participating in a massive, entirely unspoken social contract.
A social contract.
You are hurtling in a metal box at high speeds, separated from oncoming traffic by a few feet of empty air and some painted lines. And your physical safety relies entirely on trusting absolute strangers to have internalized the exact same rules, to read the exact same lines, and to use a brief flashing light to tell you their intentions.
That is wild to think about.
The true marvel isn't just that we learn to operate the machine, it's that this fragile collective trust works brilliantly, millions of times a day, across the globe.
The fragile collective trust of the open road. That is an incredible thought to end on. Thank you so much for joining us for today's deep dive. We hope it gave you a profound new appreciation for the everyday complexities of learning, failing, and navigating the world. We warmly invite you to return for our next exploration. Until then, take care.